To understand Assan, the main character in Lupin, is to understand his backstory. His father emigrated to France from Senegal and got a job as a chauffeur for a very rich, well-to-do French family. And while the woman of the house, Madame Anne, treated them pretty well as the daughter of the house, Juliette, she was a teenager and she was kind of slutty, coming on to a very young Assan, but he wasn't hating on it. Anyway, I'll get back on track. The man of the house, Hubert Pellegrini, was an asshole. And when one day this very expensive Marie Antoinette necklace went missing, of course, who are you going to blame? The Senegalese immigrant. Even though Assan's dad swore up and down that he had nothing to do with it. And the reason that Hubert really thinks he did it was because Hubert caught him in that very room the day prior. But Assan's dad wasn't stealing a necklace, he was dusting the bookshelf. And another person that was in the room that day was Madame Anne. And when Assan's dad says, "Ask your wife," Hubert says, "Keep my wife out of it," and sends him off to jail. Madame Anne never says a word, and the necklace was never found. The first chance that Assan gets to go visit his father in jail, he does so, but his father doesn't show up. And that's because his father had committed suicide. Or at least, that's the story that they're claiming. You get the idea that he might have been coerced into killing himself by other inmates. And when Assan was burying his father, Madame Anne showed up, asking if she could do anything, but at that point, it's too late. And Assan just walks by her and says, "Go fuck yourself." When Assan went back to his house, he found a gift that his father had gotten him for his birthday. And it actually was a book from that bookshelf that Madame Anne told his dad that he could take home for him. The book is called Arsène Lupin, the Gentleman Thief. And Assan read this book up and down, knowing every word, and really emulating Lupin. Lupin's whole thing is the fact that nobody knows who he is. And the fact that nobody knew who he was his biggest advantage. But he was also one step ahead of everybody. He was a lone wolf, but he did have a certain sect of people that he truly trusted. Now, present-day Assan has just gotten a new job at the Louvre as a janitor. He goes to meet with his ex, who also happens to be the mother of his child, to tell her the good news about his new job, although she doesn't think it's going to last very long. It's worth mentioning, though, it does seem like the two have a really good relationship, though. He asks about seeing his son, and they set up a date for the weekend. He then heads to go visit some low-life gangsters who he borrowed money from. The issue is he doesn't have the money. And that does not sit well with the one guy, Vincent, who's the guy we borrowed the money from. He has his goon, named Kevin, dangle Assan over a balcony, but Assan says, "Wait, I have a plan to get us more money than we ever know what to do with." Assan has devised this plan centered around the Marie Antoinette necklace that is going to be going up for auction from the museum. And his plan is to steal it. He tells them that he can get them to the necklace because he works at the Louvre, he knows the museum inside and out, and no one pays attention to the maintenance men. So the plan is for Kevin, Vincent, and their driver Rudy to sneak in as janitors while taking out some of the security guards and switching out those uniforms. Assan is going to get them in with some swipe cards, and he tells them to put chloroform in some of the cleaning bottles so they can knock these people out. They then have to disarm the security footage, and when they do that, they have about 7 minutes till the police show up. Assan, meanwhile, he'll be bidding on the necklace. And after he, quote, wins the auction, he knows that they send the necklace down to the foyer to be inspected and whatnot. That's where the group will grab the necklace, and at this point, Rudy is outside waiting in the getaway car, and they get out of there. And that plan is too good of a plan for Vincent to pass up. So it comes the day of the auction, and Assan shows up in a really good-looking suit, and the auctioneer starts explaining the history of the necklace. How, when the necklace went missing, it wasn't sold as one piece, it was broken up. And Hubert Pellegrini spent his life trying to get back those diamonds and recreate the necklace until he was finally able to do so. And that is what is going up for auction. One person that is there to watch the auction go down is Juliette Pellegrini, and Assan didn't really think that she was going to be there, but he's sitting far away from her, thinking that she probably won't notice him. The auction starts, people start bidding, and then Assan gets involved, although no one recognizes him. But Assan had planned on this, so he set up a fake Wikipedia page where he had 500+ million euros listed as his net worth. So he checks out as far as they're concerned. During the bidding, though, he gets word from Rudy that the security camera footage is disabled, and now they have 7 minutes. So he upbids everybody by an extra $20 million and wins the auction. Everything so far is going according to plan. But little does Assan know that Kevin and Vincent are planning on double-crossing him. I'm sure Rudy was too, but Rudy had left to go in the getaway car. So Assan, along with the auctioneer, head downstairs to the foyer to examine the necklace. The auctioneer is a little hesitant to do so because he hasn't gotten the money yet, but Assan makes the claim that, hey, I just bid $60 million for this thing. I clearly check out. This thing's my new baby. let me just take a look at it. And Assan is able to get his hands on the necklace. But when he does, that's when Kevin and Vincent attack, taking out everybody in the room, including Assan, and stealing the necklace for themselves. They flee the Louvre, get in the getaway car, but it's a little too much car for Rudy, and they end up crashing and going into the Louvre, getting caught in the process. When the police show up, the police captain wants to interview everybody, including Assan, which the auctioneer thinks is ridiculous because he was attacked too. But Assan plays it beautifully, saying, no, that's okay. The police are just trying to do their job. The captain, though, has never heard of Assan and wants to know how he got his money. And he says, well, if you checked your cell phone today, you've made me money. The captain, though, does get a phone call that they caught the perpetrators and they've gotten the necklace back. They're sending it to the lab for testing to make sure it's legit. And he lets Assan go. But as Assan's walking away, the captain thinks better of it and decides to pat him down, although all he finds is a pen from the Louvre. He then, for the second time, allows Assan to leave, but Assan doesn't leave, going to a restricted area and changing into his maintenance man outfit. Because this whole plan was set up 2 weeks ago. Assan knew that Kevin and Vincent were going to double-cross him, and he had a friend of his make him a fake imitation necklace. So when Kevin attacked, Assan dumped the real necklace in a trash can and threw the fake necklace on the ground, and they had no idea. And since no one pays attention to the maintenance men, that night as he's leaving this shift, he takes the trash bag, fills it full of dirty diapers, the cops really don't check it, and he's able to get the necklace out of there. Now, this plan might have been for money, might have been for revenge for his dad. Either way, though, the plan played out beautifully. The necklace, getting a job at the Louvre. This was right out of Lupin's playbook. The next day, he goes and picks up Raoul just like he planned with his ex, and he actually gives him the Lupin book, the same book that his father had grabbed from the Pellegrini library. But there's only one slight problem. Assan is not the only one who's familiar with Lupin, because a police officer by the name of Yousef is very aware of Lupin. He, in fact, thinks that this story sounds way too familiar to Lupin. And when the police get word that the necklace that they have is fake, he starts to get very suspicious. And he is on to Assan, or should I say, he is on to the fake name that Assan used in the auction, Paul Cernine. In episode 2, we'll start out with the aftermath of what happened to Assan after his father, quote, committed suicide. He gets a knock at the door from an officer named Inspector Dumal. And after Assan opens the door, Inspector Dumal's a dick. He starts to try to bully a 16-year-old kid. He tells Assan to pack his things up because he's taking him to social services. But as Assan starts packing up, he decides, yeah, I'm not really interested in doing that, and tries to sneak out the window into a neighbor's house and down a flight of stairs. The only problem is Officer Dumal is onto him and jacks him up. He takes Assan to the group home, where the head of this group home gets him all set up. He's even nice enough to give him a Bible. A little after that, the head of this youth home ends up seeing him reading the Bible and is pleased. In reality, though, he's not really reading the Bible. He's got a Lupin book hidden inside. But there's a reason he headed over there. It's because they found a suicide note in his father's belongings in prison that was for Assan. And it's his father admitting to everything that he was accused of. The man, though, has come bearing good news. An anonymous donor has come forward donating the tuition fee for one of the most prestigious schools in France for Assan to go to. He tells him, it's too good of an opportunity for you to pass up. You have to go. You have to try to make something of your life. And on one of his first days at this new prestigious school, a couple of rich kids try to just give him a hard time, but one of the other students tells the bullies to kick rocks. He introduces himself as a guy named Benjamin Farrow. And Benjamin is the antiques dealer that helps Assan out. He's the guy who made the necklace. He's his, go-to friend. And present day Assan is kind of having an issue with Ben. Ben has examined the necklace and tells him it was never broken apart. And that really upsets Assan, because if the necklace was never taken apart, then the story about the gems being scattered around the world is complete bullshit. His father was innocent, and the necklace never left the Pellegrini safe. Ben tries to tell him, man, you made it out. I mean, does that really even matter? But it does matter to Assan. For 25 years, he lived with the fact that he thought his father was a thief, when in reality, he doesn't think he was. So Assan knows he needs to get some answers, and he knows just the person to contact, Juliet. Juliet goes to visit her mother because her mother and father have since divorced. And her mother isn't exactly broken up about the fact that the necklace once again went missing. She tells her mom, though, no one's worried, the police have a lead, but Madame Anne's point is Hubert owns most of the newspapers, so she can't trust them. Anne starts kind of insulting Hubert to Juliet, and she says, could you stop? He doesn't hate you. But Anne says, that's just because I know where all the bodies are buried. She also knows that Hubert took it really hard when the necklace went missing 25 years ago, which means he's probably going to take it even harder that it happened a second time. When Juliet leaves this meeting with her mom, the man at the front desk gives her a note that gives her a time and a place to meet with the direction of no police. Of course, the note was left by Assan. And it's a very public place in a park. But before Assan meets her there, he starts calling in a bunch of food orders with a bicycle delivery service that he happens to be dressed like one of their drivers. After placing these calls, he bikes over to Juliet and tells her, "I don't want money, I want answers." And that's when he reveals himself as Assan. He's also noticed, though, that she did, in fact, bring police. She's bugged. And he covers that, which the microphone was hidden in a brooch on her jacket. And the police captain is freaking out a little bit because of the fact that they can't hear this conversation go down. The first question Assan asks is, "Why did you lie about the necklace being taken apart?" And Juliet tells him that it was a story that her and Hubert concocted to try to drum up more money when they eventually sold it. Her father ended up finding it from a jeweler in South Africa 5 years ago completely intact. She warns him that if Hubert finds out that Assan is behind this, he's dead. She begs him to just give back the necklace, and she promises she won't tell the cops that she actually knows him. The last question he has is, "Please, tell me my father was innocent." But she says, "No, I'm afraid he wasn't. He signed a confession. I'm afraid that you don't know your father like you thought you did." Assan, though, knows that the police are closing in, and he takes off, biking through the park as a bunch of police officers chase on foot. But luckily for him, he anticipated this, and all of those bicycle delivery men end up showing up at once, confusing all of the police, and they don't catch Assan. It leaves the captain infuriated that he got away, and Assan just dumps the outfit and walks out of there like it never happened. He heads back to where he keeps all of his outfits, and he's kept that suicide letter from his father. And he's noticed something. His father misspelled a couple of words, and his father never misspelled words. He thinks it's a clue. The two words that are misspelled are comet and libraries. And upon doing a little research, Assan had found that there was an inmate that was in prison with his father named Comet, and he worked in a library. He takes it to Ben because he's convinced that this is a sign, but Ben doesn't think it's anything. He thinks it's just misspelled words. Benjamin tells him if you want to answer so bad, then go visit this guy because he's still in prison. The issue is he's too sick to leave his cell, which means that Assan is going to have to get into that prison. He sets up a meeting with another inmate who doesn't look anything like him other than the fact that they're both black, and he tells him that, and Assan proposes that the two switch places. And he's worked this out perfectly because the guards, well, they just switch shifts, so they're not going to notice that the prisoner they're taking back isn't the one they brought there. As far as this prisoner, well, he's only been there for a week, so the rest of the inmates won't really realize it either, and he's getting transferred to another cell. Works out beautifully. There is only one issue. The prisoner, Traore, well, he's handcuffed. And Assan acts like he never thought of that, putting his hands over his, using his lockpicking skills, taking the handcuffs off, and putting them on himself. Right before he leaves, though, he tells him, "I know what you're in for, and if I catch you selling so much as a joint, I'm going to find you." He then yells guards, and the switch is complete. Now that he's inside, though, he has to find Comet. And he starts asking around and is able to get the cell number, but he's attracted some unwanted attention. Two of the prison drug dealers are eyeing him up. Assan was able to get a job in the prison pretty quickly delivering sheets, but when he goes to Comet's cell, he finds out that he's once again in the infirmary, and his cellie tells him, "I don't think he's coming back." This is yet another hurdle that Assan has to get over because now he has to find his way into the infirmary to talk to Comet. But as he's walking away from Comet's cell, that's when the two drug dealers show up, demanding to know who he is, and he gives them a fake name. They tell Assan that the man whose identity he stole owes him 1,000 euros worth of drugs, and he has 3 days to get it to him. They really don't care that Assan isn't this guy. Assan agrees, figuring that he'll be out of there within 3 days. He then goes to the guard and complains that he's already sick to get himself in the infirmary. And he tries to sweet-talk the doctor to get a night's stay in there, but she just figures that he's scared being in prison, not agreeing to admit him for the night. So he needs a legitimate excuse in, and he walks up to the two drug dealers and tells them that they can stick the money up their ass. And that's when they shank him. So Assan has his way into the infirmary. And that night, he is finally able to talk to Comet. He tells him who he is and who his father was, explaining that the two were in prison together at the same time. And Comet recognizes who his father was, but Comet tells him that his father was alone in his cell under surveillance when he killed himself. He explains that he only met his father once when he brought him a book. He does tell him, though, that when he returned the book, he did instruct him to keep it, just in case anybody ever came looking for it. And he still has the book, it's just in his cell. So the next day, when Assan is doing his rounds with the sheets, he once again heads back to that cell and looks around, and sure enough, there's an old Lupin book. When Assan gets back to his prison cell, he starts combing over this book looking for more clues, and he finally finds it. His father had stained certain words. And when you put the words together, it reads out, "I am innocent. I was trapped by Anne Pellegrini." He then hides the book, though, because they're handing out food. Although the guard spits in his and says that drug dealer who shanked him will be around later that night to, quote, tuck him in. They then have to go out for a rec in the yard, and Assan leaps up to try to dunk a basketball, but ends up tearing open his stitches. So he has to head back to the infirmary to get re-patched up. He asks the doctor if he can say hi to Comet, and she agrees. He tells him that he found the book, and Comet asks for a favor, to make his wife smile. He agrees, and then he says his goodbyes to the doctor, and it's not a goodbye, I'll see you later, it's a goodbye, goodbye. Now it's time for Assan to plan his escape. Now, while Assan was getting himself put in prison on purpose, Juliet is also trying to find some answers. She heads to her father's place, where she asks him if it was really Assan's father who stole the necklace 25 years ago. And he freaks out at her, screaming, of course he stole the necklace from us. He apologizes, but he just feels like it was a betrayal. That kind of question coming from her because they're so close. Now, back to the prison. That night when the guards go to, quote, check on Assan, but really let the drug dealer in and beat the shit out of him, Assan isn't in his cell. In fact, he's hanging from the shower in an apparent suicide attempt. They rush him into the ambulance to a local hospital. But Assan isn't dead. In fact, he didn't even try to commit suicide. This was all part of the plan to get out of the prison. He had swiped some pills from the infirmary when he tore his stitches open that slowed his heart rate down. And when he wakes up, he waits for the ambulance to stop at a red light, and he just hops out the back. The first place he heads the next morning is Anne Pellegrini's. He's able to sneak in using a key card and confronts her, and she is very surprised to see him. He demands to know what she did to his father, and she admits that she made him sign a confession. She tried to explain that it was better to be guilty and free than innocent and in prison. She did it because she thought that he was going to get a reduced sentence if he did so, but it turned out the judge was a hard ass. His father couldn't accept the fact that the confession that he was forced to do ended up being his downfall, and he committed suicide. She says aloud that she was naive because there were agreements made, but he cuts her off and says, agreements are only good for people like you. They're never good for people like my father. She tells him that after his father's death, she tried to help him. She did it from a distance and anonymously, but she did. And that's when Assan realizes that she was the private donor who helped him go to that school. A big reason why she did that was because she wanted to earn his forgiveness, along with his dead father's. She tells Assan that there was a police officer who swore that he'd help him, but that police officer lied. And when Assan pressures her for a name, the name she gives up is Officer Dumont, the same Dumont who put him in that group home. Assan asks her, why would Dumont exploit the fact that he knew that his dad trusted Anne? But she doesn't have an answer for that one. He then leaves. He knows he needs to fulfill his promise to Comet. He sneaks into his wife's tiny apartment and puts a giant gem on their wedding picture. He then returns to his headquarters and starts looking up what happened to Lieutenant Dumont. And then finally, for the police, well, the captain's having a tough go of it. After the failed attempt to get any information from the exchange between Juliet and Assan, he calls Juliet in because he's pretty convinced that Juliet knew who this mystery man was. But Juliet claims that she doesn't. And when he continues to press her on the matter, she says, okay, I'll tell you what I told him. I told him the officer in charge was a moron, and then she leaves. But Yousef hasn't given up on the Lupin connection. He realizes that a lot of the names connected to this are anagrams for Arsène Lupin. He tells another police officer named Sophia about this theory, but she thinks it's ridiculous. And that night, as everyone's packing up to go home, they start kind of making fun of him for that theory. In episode 3, you get more backstory on how Assan met Claire. At that fancy prep school, there were a couple of guys who were up to no good. They started making trouble in Claire's neighborhood, and Assan came to the rescue. Or so he thought. She actually got pissed off, saying, you know, girls don't need your help. We're not just fragile little beings. But then she realized she was being pretty rude, and they struck up a friendship. Now, those same guys later on continued to give the couple a hard time, and he tried to defend her honor once again, but he got his ass kicked. As she's cleaning him up, he tried to kiss her, but she pulled back because she wasn't really looking for that kind of relationship. She was just looking for a friend. Of course, as time went on, it actually did become a relationship. And while Assan was off at that prestigious school, Inspector Dumont went to go meet with Hubert Pellegrini to find out how the investigation was going. And while Dumont seemed like an asshole because he treated Assan like an asshole, he actually believed that Assan's father was innocent. The first clue was the fact that he just kept denying repeatedly that he wasn't involved, but the bigger clue is the fact that he didn't fit the profile at all. And then also, he found out that Hubert Pellegrini took out an insurance policy on the necklace about a week before it went missing. Now, Hubert said it was because he talked to a friend who said the necklace was undervalued, and he was willing to give Dumont the friend's information so he can clear him. At this point, though, Dumont definitely suspects that Hubert Pellegrini had something to do with the necklace missing. But Dumont did his job. He continued to dig around, and he found nothing. In fact, Assan's father was nowhere near the safe when the necklace went missing. Pellegrini continues to point to the fact that Assan's father's prints were all over the safe, but Dumont tells him that the experts believe the prints were planted there. Pellegrini asked Dumont, well, then who planted them there? But Dumont doesn't say anything because it's pretty obvious who Dumont thinks planted them. Dumont does tell him, though, that he's well aware of all the influence that Pellegrini has over him, but he's planning on seeing this investigation out. And that's when Pellegrini threatens Dumont's wife, and Dumont's mood changes. Pellegrini then lays out the entire plan, getting a forced confession from Assan's dad by using Anne to do it. Anne was nothing more than a puppet in this whole thing. She truly believed that he was getting a reduced sentence when he wasn't. And that was the day that Dumont sold out to Pellegrini. But present-day Assan needs to get to present-day Dumont. And present-day Dumont has been promoted to police commissioner. Assan has hooked up a bunch of cameras all over Dumont's house and is just surveilling him. And Dumont has no idea he's being watched. He waits for Dumont to go to work, where Dumont is in a meeting with the mayor, and that's when Assan walks in a disguise as an IT guy. He tells Dumont that he needs to talk to him about his computer because while they were doing an update, they found a bunch of porn. And that's pretty embarrassing, so they go out in the hallway to discuss it, and Dumont says, yeah, do whatever you want, man, get rid of it. But Assan says, I'm not getting rid of it. You need to get rid of it. It's your computer. I'm not touching it. Now, Assan almost gets his cover blown by another staffer who doesn't recognize him as the IT guy, and Dumont asks to see some identification, but Assan makes a big scene, and just to keep Assan quiet from the whole screaming, you've got porn on your computer, Dumont agrees to walk with him. They go down in a hallway where Assan uses pressure points to knock Dumont out, take his cell phone, and he breaks the SIM card. Security camera footage does catch Assan wheeling out a giant trunk to an unmarked vehicle. When Dumont wakes up, he's in a dingy room tied up with Assan in another room. Assan has video cameras set up and speakers, and he's talking through a voice changer so Dumont can't recognize him. He's also got a projector set up, and he starts to put pictures of his own father on there, as well as the autopsy report of his suicide and the police files. And the whole link in all this is that Dumont is all over all of these files. Dumont tells him that that's normal procedure because he was in charge of the investigation. But Assan tells him that's ridiculous. You had one suspect, you didn't search that hard for the necklace. Why did you frame him? But Dumont sticks to the script, saying that Assan's father was guilty because of, quote, evidence. Dumont then asks him, does this have anything to do with the robbery at the Louvre? I mean, this is the same necklace, it's 25 years later, but Assan doesn't answer him, just shutting off the microphone. Assan waits a little bit because he's done some digging, and he wants to incentivize Dumont to try to tell him what really happened to his father. And he's found out that Dumont took money from some pretty shady people. People that human trafficked, drug dealers, because the job of commissioner didn't pay that well. And no one knew about this because he was getting paid via a secret bank account, but the funny thing about secret bank accounts these days is they're not so secret if you look for them. This really upsets Dumont, who screams that he was doing it for his children, to put them in good schools and to provide for them a better life. Assan demands to know what actually happened to his father, but Dumont is sticking to the script that he was guilty, he hung himself, and that's it. But that's when Dumont says, you know, Babacar, who was Assan's father, yeah, Babacar fucked up too. I mean, he was an immigrant who didn't have a euro when he came over here. I don't blame him for doing what he did, but Assan cuts him off. Someone must have framed you to put that police report together. But Dumont says, I didn't have to. The evidence was there. Dumont then asks for some water, and since Assan isn't a savage, he brings him a bottle. And as he's waiting for his next step, Assan gets a phone call from Claire, because Claire is wondering what they're planning on getting Raoul for his birthday. And Assan has completely forgotten about this, and he tries to play it off like he hasn't, but Claire can see right through it. She asks what's keeping him so busy, but then realizes maybe she doesn't want the answer, and Assan says, yeah, you don't want the answer. She does tell him, you know, just because we're not sleeping together doesn't mean you can't talk to me, and while he appreciates that, he's not willing to tell her what he's up to. After hanging up with Claire, Assan goes to plan number 2 to try to get Dumont to talk. And that's using video that he got from Dumont's house and putting a deep fake on it. A very convincing deep fake, where Dumont is talking about liking children. I mean, videos that if they ever saw the light of day, it would ruin Dumont's life. Dumont yells at him, I told you the truth, and you just don't like it. And Assan, who at this point is very angry and very animated, yells, tell me why you framed my dad. And at that moment, Assan knows that he really messed up. Because Dumont remembers Assan and now knows who is behind all of this. Dumont pleads for forgiveness from him because he does feel bad about how he treated him back in the day, but tells him that what Assan is doing to him is the same thing that he's claiming Dumont did to his father. The only difference he claims is that he is innocent. He says, if you untie me, I won't turn you in. You can just disappear. And Assan, knowing at this point that the jig is up, tells him that he forgives him and then he takes off. Now, this whole time, the cops have been trying to find Dumont because he's the police commissioner. They start to kind of go into panic mode when they realize that the SIM card from his cell phone has been taken out. Although Yousef says that the police cell phones are different, and he's able to triangulate a location of where they think that Dumont is. But when they head there, all they find is the van, the driver from the van, and in that trunk is a clown doll dressed like a police officer. They were fooled. They start to question the driver, but he claimed that he was hired off of Craigslist, paid $200 just to pick up the trunk and drive around City Hall a few times and then head home. They start screaming at him, well, where did you drop the guy off that took the police commissioner? But he keeps saying, I dropped him off at City Hall. And only Yousef is understanding what this guy is saying. So finally, Yousef speaks up and says, guys, he's still at City Hall. Now, the rest of the police officers think that's absolutely crazy, but Yousef says, well, it's what Arsène Lupin would do. And sure enough, when they head to City Hall in the basement, they find the police commissioner. Now, after some quick questioning, Dumont was a man of his word. He doesn't give up Assan. And Sophia thinks that's really, really weird. And even the lieutenant kind of agrees, but he also says, this is a police commissioner. He's not going to lie to us. He does get called over by Yousef, though, who thinks he's finally been able to put this whole thing together. Because the video that they have from the surveillance of the guy wheeling out the trunk to the van, the food delivery guy from the park, and Paul Cernine, they all look a lot alike. They also can't find any information on Paul Cernine other than that Wikipedia page. So Yousef is convinced that all of this has to do with the necklace being stolen from 25 years ago. And while Yousef was kind of cracking the case, Dumont, after a long day, just headed home. The first thing he does when he gets there is takes out all of the cameras. And Assan is actually at home watching this, live. He then calls up Pellegrini after he takes out all the cameras and tells him that he needs to talk to him about Babacar, Assan's father, because there's a, quote, new party involved. Pellegrini then gives him a place where they should meet up, and they hang up. Shortly after hanging up the phone, his wife walks in the door, and she's thrilled to see that he's okay. He instructs the cheap Amazon Alexa to play a song, but instead of playing the song, it replays the conversation that it overheard between Dumont and Pellegrini. And just to shut it up, Dumont starts smashing it on the ground because he's pissed off, knowing that even though he got all those cameras out, Assan is still listening. And that is the reason right there why you don't go cheap with your Amazon Alexa. Episode 4 starts out with Pellegrini fast asleep as Assan uses a drone to fly through his house to take pictures of compromising documents. But as he's doing so, he actually trips an alarm system, and Pellegrini's security staff runs in to alert him that there's a threat. Now, they think it's a person, but it's not. It's just a drone. And when they find it, they're able to close it in and destroy it. They hand it over to Pellegrini, telling them that they destroyed anything that was on it. But Pellegrini notices that there's a note inside of the drone, and the note says, I'll get you. Now, the next day, as Dumont is sitting in a cafe enjoying his breakfast while reading the paper, he suddenly looks up, and there's Assan. He asks Dumont, let's talk about your friend, Pellegrini. What exactly did you want to tell him the other day? But Dumont learned his lesson. He doesn't say a word. And Assan kind of figured this might happen, so he asks him, where's your wife? And Dumont says, at work. But he says, no, she's not there. And it puts the fear of God into Dumont. Assan once again asks, what did you want to tell him? But instead of telling him what he wanted to tell him, Dumont asks him, if I give you a name, do you swear you'll stop? And Assan agrees. And the name that Dumont gives him is Fabian'S Death. She was a journalist that was really going after Pellegrini until he kind of ruined her life. So with this information, Assan gets up, walks out of the cafe, and Dumont calls his wife, but it turns out she was at work the whole time. Assan was just bluffing. Assan then went home to do some research on Fabian'S Death, and Death was a journalist who wrote a book on the Pellegrinis called Dirty Money, the Pellegrini Story. And it was all based in fact, but Pellegrini sued her, got her fired from her journalist job, which she was really good at, and now she just kind of lives her days as a borderline hoarder with her dog. So Assan reads the book to get a better idea of who she is, and then he heads to find her. And one day when she comes back from shopping, there he is sitting in her house, but she's not really all that flustered that he's there. I mean, she wants to know who he is, and he tells her, I'm a fan. I came to get your book signed. She ends up playing dumb with him, though, saying Fabian'S Death does not live there anymore, but he knows it's her. He then persists, but she continues to stick with this story that Fabian'S Death does not exist. Assan tells her that the book that she wrote was the truth, and she says, well, yeah, no, it was the truth, until I faced an army of lawyers. Even after he tells her that they have a common enemy in Pellegrini, she still isn't interested in helping him. It's worth mentioning that the more that Pellegrini's name gets mentioned, the more her dog starts barking, to the point where Assan can't ignore it anymore, and she admits that she taught her dog to bark every time he hears Pellegrini's name, which, you know, is a cool trick. Assan tries to remind her who she was as a journalist, because she was a straight bulldog. But she's still pretty leery of Assan. I mean, he did break into her house, and she asks him, how do I know you're not working for Pellegrini right now? And that's when Assan comes clean with his real motives, telling her about his father. Assan pleads with her, telling her, I need you. This book is powerful, and I need the woman who wrote it. But Death just shakes her head and says, no, I'm sorry. Pellegrini's just too well protected. Let it go. So Assan leaves, but she had time to think about it. And the next day, she's able to locate where Assan lives and meets up with him. And now it's Assan wondering how she tracked him down, but she says a good journalist never reveals her sources. He gets in the car where she tells him that after having some time to think about it, she's agreed to help Assan. They have a conversation about trust and how they both need to trust each other, and she asks for Assan's name, but he gives her a fake one, and she knows it's fake. So she gives him one more chance, but he gives her another fake name, which she once again knows is fake, until finally Assan is forced to tell her that his name is Assan Diop. And they then head off to Assan's place, where she's really impressed with his setup. She asks him, though, for the full story about what happened with Assan's dad, because he kind of just gave her the Cliff Notes version before, so he gives her the whole story. And he tells her that he's pretty positive that his dad was framed for insurance money, and she says that that would indeed check out. Back in '95, his company was on the verge of collapsing, and he would have used that insurance money to build back up his empire. They then get into how they're going to take Pellegrini down. And Assan says they need something that he cannot bury. This isn't 1995 anymore. With the internet, it's a powerful tool. They need some damning, incriminating stuff. And luckily, Fabian thinks that she has just the item. The only issue is it's at her old job, which they know her face and she's not allowed in. So the two devise a plan where he's going to go in clutching an envelope looking very skittish, with Fabian waiting in the car but calling the front desk, posing as another journalist, and telling the front desk employee to look out for this guy because he's an informant. And sure enough, the front desk employee falls for it and sends Assan right up, where he's able to grab the videotape. But as he's heading down, the front desk employee is talking to another front desk guard, where he tells him that the journalist that Fabian was posing as is on vacation. So something's not right, and it forces Assan to run out of the newspaper into Fabian's car, where they're able to narrowly get away. When they get back to Fabian's place, right before they pop in the videotape, she gives him a little backstory on what's on the videotape. It has to do with the terrorist attacks in Kuala Lumpur back in '96. 11 people were murdered in this attack, and 8 were French. And the middleman who sold the terrorists their weapons was Pellegrini. And on the video, that's exactly what you see. Pellegrini negotiating with these people for the weapons. And this video is damning. This is just what Assan and Fabian were looking for, and Assan tells her that he's going to put it up on Twitter and it'll go viral by the next day. Now, while Assan and Fabian were trying to think of a way to take Pellegrini down, the police were meeting with Dumont because they want to let him know that they think everything's connected. And against the wishes of his coworkers, Yousef tells him that he's pretty sure this guy is the inspiration from Arsène Lupin. But just like Yousef's coworkers, Dumont thinks it's absurd. They let Dumont know that they're going to go through a composite sketch to try to figure out what he looks like, and then they take off. But as soon as they leave, Dumont gets a text from Pellegrini asking him when he wants to talk about Babacar Diop, but Dumont says he needs more information. He'll be in touch soon. The police then go to do that composite sketch, and they get everybody that encountered Assan together. The issue is everybody's composite sketch looks different. The one police officer thinks it's just faulty equipment, but Yousef points out, yeah, it's crazy. It's just like the guy can change his appearance. But this is the information they have, and they bring it to Dumont, but Dumont yells at them, saying that none of these pictures look like the guy who kidnapped him. And that's when Yousef pulls out another one that he had done, because he had gone to Vincent, Assan's accomplice from the Louvre, and Vincent was more than willing to give him a very detailed description on what Assan looked like. And the description that he gave him looks exactly like Assan. And even though Dumont knows it, he denies it to the police, saying that this isn't what he looked like. And it really frustrates Yousef, who yells, yeah, this is him. But Dumont changes the subject, criticizing the police and saying that he's planning on taking them off the case because it's been 3 weeks without the necklace and they don't have any information on it. But they promise that they can get the thing right, so he tells the 2 police officers that they're on the case and takes Yousef off of it. But once they leave the meeting with Dumont, Yousef tells them, guys, you just saw what happened. He knows something. And they agree that there's something fishy going on, but they can't investigate the police commissioner. The lieutenant tells him, man, just take a back seat. You're off the case. The next day, Assan was true to his word. The video has gone viral. And Juliet finds out about it while she's in a meeting, along with her father and a couple of other people, for this charity that she's going to start up. And when she sees the video, she asks to be left alone with her father. And she shows it to him, but he just casts it off as nothing because he doesn't understand the power of social media. Juliet is very concerned, though. She knows the power of social media, and as she's just about to start a charity, she knows that any negative publicity could really do damage to it. Pellegrini swears, though, that he's not hiding anything. He wants the video to go down because he's, quote, a little paranoid that people are coming after him. Something that, quote, didn't happen. And he actually does a very rare move for him by going out and addressing the media in front of his house. And while Assan and Ben are actually watching this live, Pellegrini stands in front of the police saying that the whole thing is a lie. But Fabian, she's watching it in person because she has done something she hasn't done in years. She's joined her fellow press. And she is the one who actually asked him the question, do you think you have the victim's blood on your hands? And when Pellegrini notices who asked the question, he gets a little freaked out, doesn't answer it, and just goes back inside. And Fabian is really proud of herself. She's grinning ear to ear as she's walking back to her house. The problem is, she notices she's being followed. So she quickly hurries her pace up, and she's able to get home. And Assan is actually there waiting for her to give her flowers because she's so proud of what she was able to do. And she has a rush of energy from it. She does mention, though, how she had one of Pellegrini's men following her, and Assan gets a little concerned for her, but she says, don't worry. In my line of work, I know how to lose a tail. She then asks, all right, what do we do next? And Assan's plan is to go on TV revealing who he is, or at least who he wants the public to think he is as this Twitter account that released the video. But Fabian doesn't want him to go on this particular show that he wants to go on because she says it is trash television, but Assan says it might be, but it gets 2 million viewers a day. That's a lot of eyeballs on this thing. So she sees the logic with it, and she wants to go with him, but he says, no, I got you into this mess. I'm not allowing you to go with me. I'm going to do this myself. It's my turn to take the risk. So they both head back to Assan's place as he prepares his disguise. And while applying some makeup, he gives Fabian a pen, hoping that it might inspire her to once again become a journalist. He then heads to the TV studio, where his disguise is that of a very old man. Best way I can describe it for basketball fans is Kyrie's character of Uncle Drew. The host of the show asks him, okay, can you describe what's in this video? And he tells the host that what you're going to see is Pellegrini selling the terrorists illegal firearms for the attack in Kuala Lumpur. But when they pop in the video, it's been completely doctored. It's made to look like Pellegrini actually pulled out of the deal when both Assan and Fabian watched the real video. He clearly did not. And it totally takes Assan off guard. It actually leaves Fabian cursing at the television. It's a really bad look for Assan because there's nothing incriminating on this videotape. He's left speechless to the point where they actually have to go to commercial. And he turns to the host and says, all right, how much did he pay you? But it seems like the host legitimately has no idea what he's talking about, even though that's exactly what happened. Hubert Pellegrini is actually in the catwalk of the TV studio watching this all go down. And when Assan leaves to get out of there, a couple of Pellegrini's goons try to stop him. But Assan has worked on his fighting style since he was a kid, and he takes them both out without breaking a sweat. He's able to get out of the TV studio, rip his disguise off, and disappear. And when Pellegrini finds out that he was able to get away, he is pissed off. But he then gets a phone call from Juliet, who was watching it. And he tells Juliet, see, I told you, there was nothing to worry about. And that's when Juliet tells him, Dad, I think I know who's behind this. It's Assan Diop. She tells her father how Assan was the one who met her in the park, and she apologizes for not telling him sooner. And Pellegrini tells Juliet that Assan has always wanted to destroy them because he's blamed them for his father's death. But Babacar Diop and those people in Kuala Lumpur aren't the only blood on Hubert Pellegrini's hands. Because Assan, after leaving the TV studio, headed to Fabian's place where he sees her dog outside, which is really weird. And when he goes in, Fabian is hanging from the rafters in what's made out to look like a suicide attempt, when in reality, it was that goon from Pellegrini's that followed her. Because sadly, she didn't lose the tail. He saw where she lived. And he was able to muscle his way in where he demanded to know where Assan Diop lived, but she told him a good journalist never reveals her sources, and that's when he killed her. And when Assan finds her body, he's really broken up about it. He's able to compose himself, taking Fabian's dog with him back to his place because the dog now needs a new home, but also taking the book because she took that pen that he gave her and she wrote him a really, really nice note in it. But as Assan is trying to plan his next move, at the police station, Yousef has the composite sketch from Vincent right next to a still from the television show that night, and he is convinced that they are the same guy, that he's got him. In the Season 1 finale, we get more backstory on Assan and Claire's relationship. Claire got to the point where she was fed up with Assan. She was actually going to therapy because she realized that Assan was not her soulmate. And in defense of Claire, Assan was an asshole. He was stealing rich people's prized possessions, the kind of guy that would hop on Reddit and buy a bunch of GameStop stock just to stick it to hedge funds. But he had also had a fling with Juliet Pellegrini. She wanted to continue it, but Assan told her, no, I can't do that to Claire, and he ended things. But right before Claire ended things with Assan, she found out that she was pregnant, and that changed everything. Now, present-day Assan is really beating himself up over Fabian's death. He's not quite sure how to handle this. He doesn't want to let Pellegrini off the hook. He wants to continue going after him, and he's confiding in Ben. And Ben reminds him, dude, you have a family. And not only do you have a family, it's actually Raul's birthday today. Don't you have something planned for him? So Assan hands over Fabian's dog to Ben so he can watch him, and he heads off to Claire and Raul's. But as he's going there, he realizes that he's being followed. Now, he doesn't know this, but he's being followed by the same guy that killed Fabian. So Assan takes off, running through a parking garage and jumping on the roof and getting away. And just for good measure, he turns around, makes eye contact with the goon, and gives him a little nod to let him know, yeah, I got you on this one. He then goes to Claire and Raul's. And he's told Claire and Raul that he has something special planned for him. And the first thing he gives him is a top hat, but Raul isn't really into it. He tells Assan, you know, I really like the Lupin books, but this, I don't know. But Assan reassures him that he's going to like it, just give it a chance. And then he tells him that they have to get to the train station because they have tickets. although they don't know where they're going. So the group heads off to the train station for this mysterious trip. Now, back at the police station, even though Yousef is off the case, he can't shake it. He knows that he's missing something with this case, and he works all night trying to figure out where it is and connect the dots. And in the wee hours of the morning, he gets an alert on his phone letting him know that it's the author of the Lupin books' birthday that day. And since he worked all night, he decides to call out. Now, the other two detectives on the case, we'll call them Tweedledee and Tweedledum because they don't have a freaking clue. They get to work the next day and realize that he's gone, but they don't think anything of it. They continue to try to dive into who exactly this mystery man is, having absolutely no leads whatsoever. Now, at this point, Assan, Raoul, and Claire are on the train, and Assan lets them know that where they're headed is to a Lupin festival because of the fact that it's the author's birthday. It's in a town not too far away, and Raoul is pumped. Claire decides to take a picture of the group, but as Raoul and Assan are looking at it, Assan realizes that in the background is that goon that was following him. And he realized that he has to do something. Now, the goon had called Pellegrini to let Pellegrini know that he was on the train and he had eyes on Assan, and he's pretty sure that Assan had no idea he was there. And Pellegrini tells him to leave Assan's family, but make sure to get rid of Assan for good. Unfortunately for this guy, Assan is onto him. And he remembers that he bought Raoul a birthday cake, so he decides to light it on the train and sing happy birthday to him just to get an excuse to get the group drinks because, cake dries out your mouth. So Assan walks to the back of the train, all the way to the back, place where they hide the big storage items. And of course, the goon follows him, but it gives Assan the jump on the guy. And Assan beats him up and locks him away, thinking that he's gotten rid of the issue. When he returns, though, Claire's a little pissed off because not only did he take forever, but he returned without drinks. And Assan tells them that he got into a fight. It was just a skirmish, nothing major, but it had to do with a guy who brought up the best Lupin book. Assan disagreed. The whole thing's a lie, and Claire's pretty onto it. Not too long after that, they get word that their stop is going to be next. So Assan gets up and starts gathering his things. When he looks to his left, and here comes the goon. And he is very surprised to see him. And the goon shows him that he's holding a gun. But this time, he's not sitting back. He actually sits right next to Raoul and strikes up a conversation about Lupin. Now, Raoul doesn't know any better, but Claire knows that there's something not right with this guy, and Assan realized that he needs to now get rid of this guy for a third time. So he decides to text the police lieutenant's phone, saying, "Hey, this is Paul Cernine. I'm on this train. I'm about to get off at this station. This is what I'm wearing. Let's meet up for coffee and talk about this whole thing." But the genius is he describes Pellegrini's goon. And since this is a few towns over, the lieutenant can't get to him. So he has to call into that precinct and have cops waiting for him. And they have no idea what Paul Cernine looks like. So when the train arrives at the station, Assan tells Claire and Raoul to go ahead, he'll catch up, with Pellegrini's guy holding him at gunpoint saying, "We're going to walk off the train, don't make any false moves." But when they do that, there's about 5 or 6 police officers waiting for him. Although they're not waiting for Assan, they're waiting for Pellegrini's guy because that's the description they got. And it allows Assan to walk away. And when they search Pellegrini's guy, not only do they find the gun, they also find a hidden gem from the necklace after Assan had planted it there. So Assan thinks he's finally rid of that headache, and Assan, Claire, and Raoul go to the festival. But as they're walking over to it, with Raoul walking up ahead, Claire pulls Assan aside and says, "All right, what was that whole deal with the train? I have to know." And it takes some prodding, but finally Assan admits that it has to do with his father. And this is catching Claire off guard because Assan never talks about his father with her. It's one of those few kept secrets that he just never discussed. He promises Claire that once this whole mess is done, he can tell her all the details, but she's heard that lie before. And as Assan is pleading for forgiveness and for one more chance, they realize that they've lost Raoul. He's nowhere to be found. And that's because Raoul was kidnapped. The police in the precinct had to let Pellegrini's guy go because he didn't fit the description. So as the police back in France, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, are headed there to question him, Dumont tells them, "It wasn't your guy." Not only did he not fit the description, he didn't even look like Assan, which, by the way, Tweedledee and Tweedledum knew that, but he had an alibi for the night of the Louvre heist, and he had a permit for that gun. They had no choice but to let the guy go. And Dumont is pissed off at them for wasting more of his time. Of course, Assan has no idea that this guy is out in the public, and this guy has kidnapped Raoul, forced him at gunpoint into his car, and driven off. And Assan and Claire are frantically walking up and down the festival looking for Raoul, when all of a sudden, somebody from behind Assan says, "Lupin." And when Assan turns around, it's Yousef, staring at him in the face. And that is how part 1 of Lupin ends. But in season 2, it picks up right after season 1 left off, with Yousef turning to Assan and saying, "Lupin?" But he doesn't introduce himself as a cop. Honestly, he doesn't really have time. Claire runs up and says, "Yes, our son is missing. He's dressed up as Lupin." And Yousef informs them that he saw somebody take some kid and put him into a gray car and take off. So both Assan, Claire, and Yousef run to the parking lot, looking to see if they can get eyes on the car, but it's long gone. And Claire loses it on Assan, yelling at him, "This is all your fault." Assan goes and hotwires a car, and the whole time he's telling Claire, "Don't call the police," but she tells him, "If you leave, I'm gonna call the police." And he assures her, "I can take care of this, don't call the police." And he gets in the car. When he does, though, Yousef also gets in the car, and Assan kind of looks at him like, "What are you doing?" And Yousef tells him, "I'm here to help." So Assan doesn't really put up a fight, and the two men head off. But Claire did as she said. She calls the police. Although when the two detectives arrive, they're not much help. They tell her, we'll file a report. Then that report after 24 hours will go to another report. And Claire gets so upset and says, "All right, you're useless. I'm heading off and I'll find my son myself." While Claire was talking to the police, Assan and Yousef are trying to play catch up. They realize that there's only one road that car could have gone down. And luckily for them, Leonard had to pull over because he realized he was heading into town, and it's not the best look to have a child in the back tied up. So he pulled the car over and put Raul in the trunk. He tries to get a hold of Pellegrini, but he can't because there's no reception, which is also an issue for Yousef. He's trying to get a hold of Sophia, but he can't, and he tells Assan that once they do get service, he has to get in touch with his, quote, wife, or else she's going to be pissed because she can't get a hold of him. Because of the fact there's no service, this forces Leonard to pull over in that town. And he walks into a bar where immediately everything stops. Everybody's staring at him because he's the only black guy in the bar. When he has to use the phone, the guy says, "For customers only." So Leonard buys something and is able to use the phone and call Pellegrini and tell him that he followed Assan, but there was a small setback, and he's got his kid now. Pellegrini informs him that he doesn't care about the son, he cares about the father, so clean up the mess, do it quickly. Leonard hangs up the phone, walks back to the car, but as he's sitting there ready to take off, he notices that a car came in hot. And that's because Assan and Yousef have shown up. Yousef actually walks into the bar that Leonard just left. And because Yousef isn't black, he gets to use the phone without being a customer. He calls up Sophia and informs her that he is with Assan. She's pretty taken aback at how far he's taken this because, remember, he was supposed to be sick that day. But then he has to speed up the phone call because he sees that Assan is about to walk back in after getting no answers from anybody on the street if they've seen a car or a boy. So Yousef hurries up the phone but does let Sophia know, "I'm going to need backup." And just like with Leonard, as soon as Assan walks in the bar, everybody stops and stares at him because he's black. And racism is something he's dealt with before. When he was a kid, somebody stole Claire's violin right before a recital. And when she went to go get a new one, the guy told her how much it would cost, and it was way too much money. And Assan noticed that they had a sign up for rentals, but the guy told him that he wasn't willing to rent to him, and it was obviously because he was black. So Assan did what Assan does. He joined up with Ben and decided he's going to steal one. He waited for the guy to leave and stole the violin. When he gave it to Claire, she was thrilled to see it. I mean, he saved the day. But he lied to Claire and said that he didn't steal it and it was just being borrowed. Later that day, Assan and Ben headed to the recital and they're watching Claire play the violin beautifully. But then all of a sudden, the police show up. And when they do, it stops Claire dead in her tracks. But they don't come for Claire, who is actually holding the violin. They arrest Assan. They do end up taking that violin, but this is a good example that Assan's lying to Claire started way back in the day. It's worth noting, though, if the guy wasn't a racist piece of shit, this never would have happened. Anyway, nobody really answers Assan when he pleads at the bar. Has anyone seen a mixed racial kid? He's got frizzy hair. And the bartender yells at him saying, "I have customers." To which Assan grabs him by the back of the neck and says, "Does it sound like I'm playing?" And at that point, somebody does say, "Yeah, actually, the guy's driving off right there." And Assan and Yousef see the car speed by. So they get in their car and they chase after it. But as they're trying to play catch-up, Sophia texts Yousef, "I'm on my way." And you can't really tell whether Assan sees it or not, but Yousef grabs the phone pretty quickly and says, "It's from my wife." They continue to race after the car, but they get to a railroad crossing. And Leonard's car makes it with ease. Assan, though, has to really floor it, narrowly missing the train. But this gave Leonard enough time to sort of get away. He turned off on a random road and drove up to an abandoned, dilapidated house. I mean, this thing hadn't been touched in years. Leonard breaks in, takes Raul out, and ties him up to a chair. He then grabs the phone and texts Assan, who is looking for any hint of the car, not finding it. But he texts Assan pretending to be Raul. He says, "Hey, Dad, I was able to get away. I'm in this old house." And Assan texts him back saying, "Let's do like Lupin does with his daughter." But Yousef points out, "Hey man, it's not his daughter, it's his son." And Assan tells him that Raul is a diehard Lupin fan. He'll pick up on the mistake. And if he doesn't, then that means they're walking into a trap. And sure enough, Leonard tells on himself. So they know that Raul isn't actually the one texting him. But at this point, they've located the house. Instead of sneaking in, though, Assan stands right in the middle of the field and calls the cell phone and tells Leonard, "If you hurt my son, I'm going to kill you." And Leonard stares back at him and says, "If you want your son, come get him." So they hang up the phone and Assan starts walking back to the car and Yousef says, "Hey man, we should call the police." But Assan tells him we can't because they're either in that guy's pocket or they're incompetent. Assan starts fishing through the trunk for anything that can help him, and then he gets back in the car and asks Yousef how long till they show up. And Yousef says, "What are you talking about?" And Assan says, "The police. They're the ones you called earlier. They're your wife because you're actually a cop. I know all about you." Yousef starts to tell him that he's been tracking him for a while, and only he's the one that figured out who he actually was. And he would arrest him if he was armed, but he's not. He then asks how much time, and Yousef says an hour, maybe less. And he's pretty accurate because Sophia is on her way. She's about an hour and a half out. Assan then thanks him and gets out of the car, and when Yousef tries to leave, he can't because Assan tied him up and tells him, "I told you, I don't work with police." By the time Assan enters the house, though, it's nightfall, and Leonard closed up all the doors, all the windows, so it's pitch black in the house. He's also set up some booby traps to let him know where Assan might be, like a broken glass, but Assan is onto it. Assan starts slowly sneaking through the house with a flashlight, looking for Raul. And Leonard is doing the same thing. He's looking for Assan, though, with a shotgun that he was able to find in the house. Eventually, though, Assan also arms himself with a pool cue he found. And when the two men find each other, they start going at it. Assan trying to wiggle the shotgun away from him because he realized he brought a pool cue to a gunfight. And the two men trade shots back and forth until finally Assan gets the better of Leonard by literally throwing him out the upstairs window. When Assan looks down on the ground, it looks like Leonard is dead. But he's not. He's just really pissed off. Assan starts frantically looking through the house for Raul, but he's not finding him. And that's because while Assan was talking to Yousef in the car, Leonard was busy transporting Raul from the house back to the trunk of the car. And when Leonard gets up, he decides to go douse that car with gasoline, light it on fire, and text Assan back saying, "Next time, maybe you should look in the car." And by the time Assan gets downstairs, he arrives in just enough time to see the car explode. He's crying, beside himself, because he feels like he just watched his son die. And it's at this moment that Sophia arrives and tells him to get on his knees at gunpoint, which he does. But he's telling her, "My son was in there." She doesn't care, though. She thinks it's just a trap, but it's not. And he just continues to cry. In episode 2, Sophia calls police and the fire department to put out the fire on the car. She takes Assan into custody, and her, along with another police officer, start taking him back to Paris. But the whole time he's asking, "What did you find in the trunk? Did you find my son?" And at first, Sophia isn't answering the question because she thinks it's just another one of his tricks. Finally, she says, "You know what we found? Nothing. We found nothing in the trunk." And that's because Raul was able to get away. After Assan left Yousef, he wasn't just going to sit in that car and wait. He broke the window and ended up cutting the zip tie with a broken piece of glass. When he headed to the house, that's when he saw the car on fire and he heard somebody screaming from inside of it to help. So he helped. He jimmied open the trunk and was able to get Raul out of there. But as they were heading back to the car that Yousef was tied up in, Leonard started shooting at them. Yousef and Raul were able to get away, but Leonard ended up calling Pellegrini and letting him know that one of Dumont's men had Raul. Now, Assan doesn't know any of this, but he's just thrilled to find out that his son wasn't found in that car. Now he's got to figure out how to get out of police custody. When they stop off for gas, Sophia looks at him and says, "Don't even think about it." And he says, "Oh, don't worry. I'm not going to escape till we get back to Paris." Which somehow does kind of put her mind at ease a little bit. He has to use the bathroom, and while she's reluctant, what is she going to do? Make the guy pee his pants? Peeing your pants isn't cool. So she sends the other police officer to go monitor him while she goes and pays for gas. And that's a bad idea. Assan tells the guy that he needs to come into the bathroom with him because he can't do anything in handcuffs. And he ends up getting out of the handcuffs, handcuffing the police officer to the toilet, and escaping. He still has Yousef's badge, so he tells a civilian, "Sir, you have a flat tire." And then he takes the gun he confiscated and shoots the police vehicle's tire and says, "Oh, my bad, wrong car." But then he steals the guy's vehicle and heads off and escapes. Sophia is really upset that she was that stupid. Sophia is really upset that she fell for that. And then she has to call Dumont and let him know what happened. When Dumont gets the news, he heads over and meets with Pellegrini to let him know that, once again, Assan was able to get away. And Pellegrini kind of chuckles and says, "Well, at least you have a son," which is something that Dumont didn't even know. Pellegrini informs Dumont that one of his guys, Yousef Gadira, has his son and is heading back into town. So Pellegrini says, "We're just going to use his son as bait. This is going to make things so much easier because he's going to come right to us. When Assan shows up, you arrest him, you and my men." Dumont, though, hates this idea because it's acting out of procedure. But Pellegrini reminds him this is the most wanted man in France. None of his bosses are going to care about procedure once he arrests him. And since Dumont is in his pocket, he agrees. When he gets out of the meeting with Pellegrini, he texts Yousef, "Great job with the Diop kid. Call me." But unbeknownst to him, Assan has Yousef's phone. So he's actually the one reading this. He texts Dumont back, "I can't talk, I'm driving." And Dumont texts back, okay, that's fine. Just bring the kid to the Park Hyatt Hotel. I'll explain everything there. And Assan responds with, I'm on my way. And the reason that Dumont wants Raul brought to the Park Hyatt Hotel is because the Pellegrini Foundation is having a fundraiser there that night. But Assan wants to do more research on why they're picking the Hyatt. So he goes home, and a quick Google search brings up a video of Pellegrini and Juliet on the news talking about how their foundation was robbed, but they refuse to let that get in the way of helping others. So they're organizing a dinner that night at the hotel with generous donors. Now Assan just needs to figure out how he's going to get in. And he starts looking at his disguises and formulating a plan for that night. Around that same time, though, Yousef arrives back in town with Raul. He heads back to Raul's house to drop him off, but he doesn't find Claire, he doesn't find Assan. What he finds is guys who are claiming to be on the force telling him, what are you doing with the kid here? He's supposed to be at the Hyatt. Take him over there. So Yousef does as he's told. He takes Raul over to the hotel where he's greeted by Dumont, who congratulates him on bringing in the kid. Yousef asks him, where's Assan? And Dumont pulls him away from Raul and says, listen, man, this case has gone all the way to the top. We can't keep letting this guy make us look like idiots. I'm now handling the case personally. We also have reason to believe the kid's in danger. I can't tell you what information because it's confidential, but what I will tell you is if the kid stays with me, he's going to be safe. Yousef, though, isn't willing to just go home and pat himself on the back. He tells Dumont, I don't get all this. What's going on? And Dumont pulls rank, telling him, do I have to tell you how to obey orders? That's not really a choice, so Yousef has to leave Raul with Dumont. When Yousef gets back to the station that day, he has a package waiting for him. And he opens it up to find his cell phone with a note that says, thank you, Ganimard, who is his favorite character from Lupin. It's the police officer in the story. So that puts a smile on Yousef's face. I think mainly because he got his cell phone back, and buying a cell phone is really expensive. Back at the hotel, though, Dumont promises Raul that it'll be over soon, and then he takes him up to the hotel room to wait. But now that they've laid the trap, they need to get Assan's attention. So they have Raul call up Assan and tell him, I'm at the Hyatt Hotel, and then hang up. After the phone call, Pellegrini has a conversation with Raul where he tells him that his father's a criminal, just like his father back in the day. Raul doesn't want to believe it, but he also can't explain what his dad does for a living. He also tells Raul that Assan doesn't give a damn about his family, and Raul is saying that's not true. And Pellegrini says, well, I guess we'll see, because he's on his way here. But that night, the dinner kicks off. Juliet Pellegrini is introduced to the president of the foundation, and she starts giving a speech to the donors about how everybody deserves culture. That is the whole mission of this foundation. And as she's waxing poetic downstairs to all these high rollers trying to get in their wallets, Dumont is upstairs with Raul as they wait for Assan to show his face. But Assan's not just going to walk through the door. The plan he's come up with is to pose one of the hotel staff. He puts on a piss-poor disguise, and he is able to get in the hotel via the back way. But his disguise was so bad that one of the security staff members notices him because they were all tipped off to what Assan might look like. It forces Assan to change his entire plan. He starts getting recognized by security officer after security officer, and a couple of them he actually has to knock out or else he would be apprehended. Assan isn't able to actually look around the hotel for Raul. He has to walk out front and formulate a new plan. And that's when he remembers what he did as a kid with the violin situation. After he was arrested for stealing the violin, he got sent to the principal's office because the principal wanted to figure out what he wanted to do with him. But as he was sitting there waiting for the principal to walk in, the principal got a phone call from the violin store owner telling him that he wanted Assan persecuted up to the fullest extent of the law. Assan didn't want the principal to hear this, so he stole the answering machine tape. He had Ben listen to it, and they tried to figure out what they were going to do, because they couldn't just steal the tape and let that be. The principal was planning on heading to the violin store to ask the guy what he wanted to do with Assan if he didn't hear back from him. The plan back then that they came up with is simply calling the principal using a fake voice and saying, I think I've had a change of heart. After all, the principal never heard the violin owner's actual voice. But this is 2021. There's better technology than that. So Assan heads back to his hideout and puts that technology into use. Using a bunch of voice modifiers and interviews with Pellegrini, he's able to call Dumont and make it look like it's from Pellegrini's actual cell phone. He's then able to talk to Dumont, where Dumont doesn't hear Assan's voice, but he hears Pellegrini's. And at this point, Dumont's on edge because he knows that Assan was spotted in the hotel, but they don't know where he is. So Assan, posing as Pellegrini, says, you got to get the kid out of here now. We don't know where Assan is. We've lost control of the situation, and that kid is our only bargaining chip. And Dumont's a little taken aback by this, but he's a lapdog, so he does as he's told. The whole time, Assan, pretending to be Pellegrini, is directing Dumont downstairs with Raul and telling him to put Raul in a van where he's waiting for him. Dumont thinks he did a great job, and he heads back into the dinner to get his pat on the head from Pellegrini. But as he's staring at Pellegrini, he gets a phone call from Pellegrini's cell, and that's when he realizes that he's been played by Assan. He has to fess up to Pellegrini about what happened, about how once again they got duped by Assan. But Pellegrini surprisingly isn't mad about it. He turns to Dumont and says, "This is why you have backups." And that backup is shockingly Claire. As Claire was heading back to Paris on the train, pretty depressed, she saw a newspaper article about the killed journalist. She also saw Assan's disguise from the news, and she had a feeling that Pellegrini had something to do with her son being kidnapped. So she went to go visit him. She offered him a deal. "You want your necklace back? Well, here's proof that I have it." And she gave him 1 diamond. She said, "When I get my son back, you get the rest of your diamond back." But to her surprise, Pellegrini said, "That's great. I don't want the necklace anymore. What I want is Assan." So she made a deal with Pellegrini. And when Assan and Raoul show up, Claire is waiting for them at the apartment. But it's Claire and a bunch of Pellegrini's men. You can tell she has mixed emotions about what she's doing. And she asks the guys, "Can I just have a few minutes alone with my son?" And they agree. So when Raoul comes upstairs, Claire goes and meets them in the hallway, and she gives Raoul a big hug. But by the look on her face, Assan can tell that something's not right. And that's when Claire mouths to him, "Run." In episode 3, Assan is able to get away from the guys, but he heads to the attic and overhears a conversation between Claire and Raoul. Raoul asks, "Who were those guys?" And Claire only wants to focus on if he's okay. And he says, "Yeah, I'm fine. Dad saved me. He was great." And she says, "No, he's not great. He's dangerous." Raoul says, "Nah, that's not true." But she says, "No, it is. You're old enough to know who your dad is. He's dangerous. I don't want you seeing him." And Raoul kind of had half the story. When they were driving over, he asked Assan, "Are you really a thief?" And Assan said, "Well, you're old enough to know. 25 years ago, Pellegrini framed my dad, and now he's coming after you." So all of a sudden, his mom telling him that his dad is this horrible guy, it's kind of coming out of left field. But she gives him a huge hug and says, "This is the last time he puts you in danger. I'm not going to let you see him again." And a week later, she's been true to her word. She's not answering Assan, which is pissing him off. He meets with Ben for coffee, and he starts ranting and raving about how Claire has no right to keep him in the dark and not answer his texts or anything. And Ben reminds him, her son was kidnapped. This is kind of normal behavior. But Assan feels like ratting him out to Pellegrini is going too far. Ben wants to get off topic, so he says, "Okay, well, what's the new plan?" And Assan says, "Well, if Pellegrini took it out on my son, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to take it out on his daughter." They start putting a plan together to manipulate Juliet. It starts out with Ben booking a reservation for 2 near a window at a restaurant. He then called Juliet and pretended to be a rich Canadian donor that wanted to meet with her for dinner at that restaurant. Of course, the rich Canadian donor was never going to show up. After that, it's kind of all on Assan and Juliet to buy in. She needs to believe that he would do anything for her. After forming the beginning stage of the plan with Ben, he calls up Yousef, which completely takes him off guard, but lets him know that on Monday he wants to meet with him at a coffee place at 10 a.m. And he tells Yousef, "Do not bring the police, I will know." The next night, the first phase of their plan goes into effect. Assan happens to stroll by that restaurant where Juliet ends up noticing him, knocking on the window and inviting him in because she's being stood up. Assan plays it off like he's being trapped the whole time knowing that he's not. In fact, he actually plays it off like she had planned to be there and run into him. He starts questioning which members of the waitstaff are her security. He tells her that everything has gone too far, but she says, "I don't know what you mean. I mean, I know everything hasn't been great with our families over the years, but we're not our fathers. Their relationship has poisoned our relationship. The reality is, there's no catch, Assan. I'm here alone. Feel free to leave if you want to, but the food's really good." And when the waiter comes back, Assan decides to stay. As Assan and Juliet catch up over salmon, her father is meeting with a young financial analyst, we'll call him, named Philip. He lets Pellegrini know that calculations are pointing to them getting about $10 million in donations. 15% is going to go to the foundation. 85% is going to go to an offshore bank account in Hubert Pellegrini's name. After explaining the specifics, Philip asks him, "I do have one question. Is Juliet participating in this fraud?" And while Hubert hates using that word, he shakes his head. No, she's not. But back at the restaurant, Juliet and Assan continue to catch up over the good old days and about how different their lives become from what they expected it to be. They actually decide to spice it up in a big way. They dine and dash. Although it's not really a dine and dash because Ben has already paid for the check. This was all part of the plan. They then steal a scooter, which was also part of the plan. But it's genius because it makes everything look so spontaneous. And as Assan and Juliet flee, Assan starts taking her through a trip down memory lane, if you will, hitting all of their former favorite spots. When Assan finally drops her off, they both say how they had such a good time. But the next day is phase 2. Assan going to visit Juliet as she tours an art gallery. As Juliet is talking to the museum curator, she sees in the balcony Assan waiting for her. So she excuses herself to go talk to Assan and says, look, last night we had fun. And Assan cuts her off and says, well, today could be fun too. And she says, I adored last night, but we're not 20 now. She then excuses herself and heads back to the office where she runs into her dad and Philip. And her dad introduces her to Philip as the guy who's building the system to assist in donations. She then gets informed that a package has arrived for her in her office. But right before she opens it, she starts getting a flurry of notifications on her phone, on her email. And when she opens it up, she finds news articles and even a video of the museum curator that she was talking to being interviewed about a stolen painting. Now, this was all also part of Assan's plan. He manipulated the footage. The footage was actually from when Notre Dame got caught on fire, but he changed the headline from Notre Dame to this painting. So at this point, Juliet has a pretty good idea of what this package is, but she opens it up to confirm that it is the, quote, stolen painting that isn't actually stolen. It's a complete fake. Ben took care of everything. Assan couldn't stop there, though. He actually paid off some former prison buddies to come over to the place, pretend to be cops, and interview Juliet about the stolen art. This completely sold it. It also ensured Assan that Juliet would come calling again. And of course she does. She meets up with him and says, are you crazy? You can't just steal a painting and send it to me? And he's kind of chuckling a little bit about it, but she's freaking out because of the, quote, police that stopped by her place. She asks him, what are you doing? The dinner, the ride on the scooter, now the painting. You made your choice. You chose Claire. And Assan says, well, yes, Claire is the mother of my child, but that's all she is to me. She tells him to shut up and starts walking away. And he goes, no. Deep down, you have feelings for me. I mean, look, there are no police. You didn't rat me out this time. Just the two of us. We both want this. Maybe it's not too late. So Juliet turns to him and says, well, prove it. Juliet has this hobby of spying on Claire via Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. And recently, Claire posted a photo of her with her new boyfriend and a bracelet that Claire's wearing that he bought her. So Juliet wants that bracelet. She wants Assan to steal it for her to prove his loyalty. There is a slight issue, though. When Assan goes to Ben about the bracelet, Ben has to tell him, I kind of sold it to him. And it's not like there's another one out there. It's the only one. So unfortunately, if you do want the bracelet, you're going to have to steal it from Claire. This was not a part of the plan. And it forces Assan to break into Claire's apartment and actually steal the bracelet right off her wrist, while Claire and her boyfriend are sleeping. Super awkward. But mission accomplished. He meets up with Juliet the next day and hands her the bracelet. He tells Juliet that he wants to start with a clean slate. That includes returning the stolen art that, once again, isn't actually stolen. He tells Juliet that they never actually got to start a relationship that they wanted to, and that is true. When they were kids, Juliet ran into Assan down by a waterway and invited him there the next day. But when she went to actually go meet with him, Hubert got wind of it and shut it down completely. So a relationship between the two when they were kids really wasn't allowed to get off the ground floor. But when Assan brings it up, Juliet kind of gets annoyed and says, what, you want me to pick between you and my dad? And Assan tells her, 25 years ago, your dad framed my dad for stealing that necklace. If you don't believe me, ask your mother. She knows. Your mom will tell you the truth about your dad, what he did. Once you've heard the whole story, you'll do what's right. He then gives her an envelope with Yousef's contact information, telling her that it's a cop that they can trust. He caps it off with a cherry on top, telling her that they missed their chance when they were young, but they can do what they want now. And she is completely infatuated with him. And this is exactly what Assan needed. He needed her to be infatuated with him if she was going to turn on her dad. She hands over the necklace and gives it to Assan, who does end up sending it back to Claire. But right before he does take off, he tells her, you'll know exactly where to find me, which is that waterway that they ran into each other years ago when they were kids. And then Juliet heads on over to her mom's place to get the full rundown of exactly what happened between Hubert Pellegrini and Bob Carr. And Anne Pellegrini admits to everything, how Hubert needed a fall guy, and that was Bob Carr. And the reason she didn't tip off the police at the time was Hubert Pellegrini was Juliet's dad, and she looked at her dad like a hero. Juliet urges her mom to go tell the truth, talk to the police. And then she hands over the envelope that has Yousef's contact information in it. And part of that contact information is where to meet Yousef. This is the whole reason why Assan called him and said, I want to meet for coffee. It wasn't for Yousef to meet Assan, it was for Yousef to meet Anne Pellegrini and hear her side of things. Sure enough, Anne Pellegrini shows up and spills everything. And shortly after Hubert signs the paperwork with Philip, Yousef and the police captain bust on through and arrest Hubert for fraud and obstruction of justice. And it's worth mentioning that when Hubert Pellegrini gets arrested, Philip looks as shocked as Hubert does. This arrest hits the news, and Ben's thrilled. He thinks mission is accomplished. But then he gets a phone call from Assan telling him, yeah, I'm going to be a little late because I got to go meet with Juliet. And that wasn't a part of the plan. Ben urges him not to go meet with Juliet, saying, Assan, it's done. But Assan just says, I promise I won't be long, and then hangs up. And he goes down and meets Juliet, just like they had planned. In episode 4, the police bring Hubert Pellegrini in for questioning, but he's more interested with threatening them with their jobs than actually answering their questions. He's got friends in high places, so he's not really willing to cooperate. They question him about the insurance claim against the necklace and then him trying to sell it, but he passes that off as, yeah, that's not really unusual. Plus, I gave the insurance money back. Sophia then asks him, do you know this man? And hands him a picture of Assan, and he says, of course I do. It's Assan Diop. He's the guy who stole the necklace a few weeks back, just like his father did back in the day. And Assan Diop is a name that the police weren't familiar with. This is the first time they actually get Assan's real name. Up until this, they thought his name was Paul Cernine. They then pull out a picture of Leonard and ask Pellegrini, do you know who he is? And Pellegrini is very reluctant to answer that question. He plays it off like he's thinking, he's not sure. And the reason they're asking him is because Leonard was arrested on a train with a gun. The gun was purchased under a fake name with an address in Paris, an address that is owned by Hubert Pellegrini. Pellegrini passes it off, though, that he must be a tenant. He doesn't know the everyday goings-on with his tenants. And the police captain asks him, well, he used a fake name. Do you have any idea why he would do that? Pellegrini says, why don't you go ask him? They are planning on doing that. And the reason being is they're pretty sure that Leonard was the one who tried to kidnap Raoul back in Normandy. They continue to pester Pellegrini on who Leonard is, what's his real name, but that's when Pellegrini gets that phone call from his powerful friend who instructs the police department to let Pellegrini go, and they don't have a choice. Yousef's pissed off about that because it feels like it's an abuse of power, but the police captain's okay with it for the time being because at least they got something out of it. They got Assan's name. And Assan has started his day off by scamming a guy who seems to be walking to work. As the guy's walking, somebody bumps into him and then steals his briefcase. Assan, pretending to be a bystander, runs after the guy, grabbing the briefcase and returning it. But when he returns it to the guy tells Assan, thanks so much, man, have a nice day. And Assan responds, have a nice day, Lucas. And then he walks off, which is very confusing to the guy. He then goes and meets with Juliet, who is freaking out a little bit. She's wondering what the hell did she just do? She knows her father's going to try to figure out who tipped off the police. And Assan reminds her, you didn't talk to the police. Your mother did. And the police officer that your mother spoke to is a good guy. He won't talk. Don't worry. Juliet starts talking about how she wants to cancel the concert they're having for their foundation because this could be a really negative look with her father being arrested. But Assan says, no, you can't. If you cancel, that's going to look even more suspicious. Plus, this concert's going to raise a lot of money for kids who need it. Don't abandon the kids, the foundation, their future. Don't abandon that just because of this. If you abandon this concert, your father ends up winning. He continues to try to press Juliet on not canceling the concert, but then he gets a phone call from Ben. He takes it thinking it's an emergency, but it's not. Ben just wants to get rid of the dog. Every time he even thinks Pellegrini, the dog barks. The dog is driving him nuts. Assan tells Ben, okay, man, I'll take the dog back. Just meet me at my place with him. So Ben packs up the dog and heads to Assan's place, which is an issue. Because after being arrested, Pellegrini is out for blood. He gets his two goons together, Leonard and Pasquale. And Pasquale has done a little digging and called up the cemetery where Fabian is buried and offered to pay for the funeral, pretending to be a relative. But he was informed that the funeral was already paid for. And that was pretty interesting to him because she didn't have any friends and her dog didn't pay for it. He wanted the person's name, saying that he wanted to just thank the person. And the name they gave him was BTA Farrell. And BTA Farrell is run by Benjamin Farrell. The fact that Ben specializes in gemstones and the kind of shop he runs, they figure that this has got to be Diop's accomplice. It makes perfect sense. So if Ben really knows Diop, the plan is to put him under surveillance and tail him. Pellegrini instructs Leonard to be the one to tail him. But as Leonard leaves to go find Ben, Pellegrini pulls Pascal aside and tells him that Leonard has a lot to atone for, and instructs him that as Leonard is tailing Ben, Pascal is to tail Leonard. And when Leonard finally gets into Assan's house, to kill Leonard. And the plan goes just as expected. Ben leaves his shop with the dog in tow, unknowingly being tailed by Leonard, and he leads Leonard right to Assan's place. Assan takes the dog from Ben, says goodbye, puts on an album, and then starts making dinner. He doesn't even notice that Leonard has snuck into his house. And he definitely doesn't notice when Pascal sneaks up from behind Leonard and kills him. As Pascal flees Assan's place, he calls the police and tells them that he just heard a fight going down at the address and they should send somebody over. And a short time after that, when Assan turns around, the dog isn't there because the dog is sniffing Leonard's dead body, and now Assan knows, yeah, I got an issue. He gets out of his place just in the nick of time, just before the police show up. But now Assan Diop is the most wanted man in Paris. He's wanted for murder and he's wanted for stealing the necklace. This news is shocking for a few people, mainly his family, Claire and Raoul, Juliet, who is floored, but also for Yousef. Sophia can tell that something's bothering Yousef, and he says, this doesn't make sense. I thought Assan Diop was Lupin. Lupin is the gentleman burglar. He doesn't kill people. But Sophia looks at him and says, well, maybe in the books, Gadira, but in the real world, Diop is a killer. The police have Assan's picture plastered all over Paris, and they start going over his apartment looking for clues on where he might be. They also recognize Leonard as the guy that they were supposed to question. But as Sophia and the police captain are going over Leonard's body, Dumont pulls the captain aside and tells him that he wants only him and the police captain going over the evidence. He tells him it's a sensitive case, and only them two will have access to it. But Pellegrini's men weren't going after just Assan. Pascal is also going after Ben, who got a tip from Assan that they were probably coming after him too. So Ben flees. The whole time, though, he's on the phone with Assan as Assan gives him directions. And Ben can tell that he's being followed by somebody. Assan gives Ben directions to a bus stop because he knows the guy won't kill him in broad daylight. He then instructs Ben to hop on the bus, but just as it's about to leave, to hop off of it. This works, actually. He loses his tail, and that's when Assan meets up with him. The two men end up going to a sort of safe house they have. Really, it's just a storage facility. And it's a good thing that Assan tipped off Ben, because Pellegrini texts Dumont that Ben is Assan's accomplice. He pulls the police captain aside and asks, is the evidence secure? And the police captain assures him that it is. He then gives him the post-it note with Ben's address for the flea market shop and tells him, we're pretty sure this guy is working with Assan. Go check it out. So the police captain grabs Sophia but tells Yousef, you stay here. The police go over to Ben's store and start going through everything, trying to find a hint of where they might have gone. And then Sophia finds it. It's a little slip of paper that Ben forgot to get rid of with an address to the storage facility. So the police head over there. But Ben and Assan are just chilling. Ben thinks they need to get out of Paris, but Assan says, if I leave Paris, that's going to admit I'm guilty, and I'm not. I need to clear my name. One way he figures he can do that is by writing a cryptic message in the comments section of an article all about him. Ben thinks it's nuts, but Assan hopes that Yousef sees it and deciphers it. Assan reassures Ben, though, that they didn't do what they did for nothing. His plan at the concert will prove that he's innocent. But then all of a sudden, they hear clamoring outside, and they know that it's the police. They know they need to get the hell out of there. Luckily for them, they've thought of this. They have a secret exit. The exit goes to the catacombs. And right before they leave, they grab a secret map that they got when they were kids and visited the catacombs. A map of all the tunnels that the public doesn't have access to. So they grab that map and they head down, hoping that they could evade the police. Eventually, the police do end up finding the storage unit, opening it up, and finding the trap door. The police end up running into the catacombs looking for Assan, but all they find is a guide tour. They tell the guide, you need to shut down all entrances and exits to the catacombs. But that's not even going to matter. With that map that they have, Assan and Ben are able to take another tunnel that's not even known about and take another exit that leads them into the middle of a park. They knew about this because they did it when they were kids. They split up, but then agree to meet up that night, and as they're looking at the venue of the concert of the Foundation, Assan knows that within 24 hours, he'll be innocent. But the good thing for Assan is Yousef had nothing to do, and he did pick up on that message. He ended up deciphering it, where the message was Jewish lamp. Yousef realized that what Assan was referring to was the menorah that was taken from his place and put into evidence. And even though no one else is supposed to go into evidence other than the police captain and Dumont, Yousef ends up sneaking in there, finding it, and busting open one of the candles to find a USB drive. When he plugs it in, it's all the information on his father, on his case, and how Dumont is actually working with Pellegrini. But at the exact time that Yousef is finding out that his police commissioner is dirty, the police commissioner heads over to meet with Pellegrini. Dumont walks in with Pellegrini, Pascal, and Philip in a room together, and he tells them that they've collected Assan's items. All they need to do now is destroy it, anything that could link back to them. Dumont turns to Pellegrini and says, you still need to be careful, though, because my men are asking a lot of questions. They're pretty close to realizing what's actually going on here. Pellegrini tells him, relax. The only thing you need to do is attend the concert. And then, within 24 hours, you're going to be almost as rich as I am. Enjoy this, because the money is on its way, and it's the beginning of a new life. And in the season finale, Assan's plan for the concert that night has been weeks in the making. It started with Ben and Assan sneaking another drone into Pellegrini's place, where they were able to get the name of his financial advisor. His financial advisor is the guy who Assan was able to retrieve the briefcase of. The guy who knocked into him was actually Ben. They realized that they needed to get the information in that briefcase. So Ben knocked into him, stole it, ran to his car, downloaded all the information, and then Assan brought it back. Now with Pellegrini's financial information, Assan realized they need an accomplice. And they need an accomplice who's like-minded. So they head to the library and stake out the Lupin section. And it takes a while, but eventually they find their guy. Because to the trained Lupin eye, it's pretty clear that Assan is not actually reading the book, and the book that Ben's reading is upside down. They get that person. It's a gothic-looking kid, but he nails the test. They ask him if he wants to be a part of what they're doing, and he says, okay. So the first thing they have to do is give him a whole new look. So they create a new identity for this guy. He's going to be a financial expert who's going to worm his way into Pellegrini's inner circle by promising risky financial practices for high returns. In return, he's going to get a diamond now and a bigger diamond when the job is done. That person ended up being Philip. The next step is to play Lucas, the financial manager that Pellegrini already has. Assan calls him up pretending to be a guy from Brussels, telling Lucas that there's some hotshot analyst out there who's trying to steal his clients, and he wanted to warn him. He tells him the name is Philip Corbet and to watch out for him. But Lucas is someone who clearly doesn't know his clientele because he calls up Pellegrini and tells him to be on the lookout for this guy who does risky maneuvers, but they always end up working out. The fact that they always end up working out for big returns is all that Pellegrini hears. He ends up getting the name from Lucas and end up calling Philip in. Philip gets brought in, and there's a wolf in the henhouse. Now it's the matter of actually getting into the concert because Assan is still wanted for murder after all. But with Philip on the inside, that's not going to be an issue. Philip has Pellegrini and his men wheel a bunch of huge crates in, and one of those crates has Assan in it. Ben actually ends up helping with this. So both Ben and Philip end up wheeling Assan in under the guise that it's all computer technology, hardware that will be used to accept the donations for the concert. They do end up getting stopped by Dumont, but Philip talks him out of actually searching every single crate. As Assan was sneaking in, Sophia was getting word back from forensics that Assan did not murder Leonard. It's pretty clear to forensics that Leonard was strangled from behind, and the boot size doesn't match Assan's. So he's not their guy. After she gets off the phone with forensics, that's when Yousef shows her the video that he discovered of Dumont admitting to everything. Yousef and Sophia get the police captain in the room, and Yousef goes over the entire scenario that he's figured out. Everything that's happened. How Dumont's dirty, how Leonard was accused to kill Babacar Diop, how Dumont has been covering it up, how Dumont is in Pellegrini's pocket, the whole nine. So when it comes time for the concert, all the guests show up, but so do the police captain, Yousef, and Sophia. And they're just waiting for Dumont to make some kind of move. While the guests are filing in, Philip, Ben, and Assan hide off in a room overlooking everything. Philip has the computers ready to go to accept all the donations. And of course, Pellegrini thinks that 85% of the donations are going to go right into his bank account. But he's mistaken. Pellegrini makes his way to his seat, and Juliet takes the stage to welcome everybody and ask them to be generous for this foundation. The concert kicks off, and donations start flying into the computer system. Philip is watching the number tick up and up and up. But as the orchestra plays on, Assan makes his way to Pellegrini's private box. He sneaks in and puts a knife to Pellegrini's throat. It takes a little bit, but Assan is able to get Pellegrini to admit to everything. Why he framed his father, kidnapping his son, Leonard killing Fabian on his behest, and that Pascal ended up killing Leonard. But Pellegrini starts mocking him with the fact that the truth isn't going to get him anything, no one's going to believe him, and he's never going to make it out of the concert hall alive. Assan gets pretty close to actually cutting Pellegrini's throat, but he ends up fleeing, and as soon as he leaves his private box, Pellegrini yells, "There he is, there's Assan Diop, get him." And it leaves Assan running for his life. Assan starts running throughout the building. A few times he almost gets caught, but he's able to evade them. Pellegrini's men end up tipping off Dumont that Assan is in the building. So Dumont ends up leaving and telling the police he's in there somewhere, go find him. But Pascal has actually located him and cornered him. It's in a dressing room, and Pascal and Assan start getting into it, both men throwing haymakers at the other. Eventually, though, Assan ends up knocking Pascal out and locking him in a closet. As Assan starts making his way to the stage, he's stopped by Dumont at gunpoint. But as Dumont is ordering him to get on his knees, the police captain, Sophia, and Yousef are right behind him, telling Dumont to get down because he's under arrest. Sophia also orders Assan to stay where he is, but Yousef convinces her to just let him go. Dumont is taken into custody, and Assan takes the stage. As he does so, a picture of Assan and his dad end up going up on the big screen right behind the orchestra. Everybody is shocked that Assan is taking the stage because he's still wanted for murder. He announces to everybody that Hubert Pellegrini falsely accused his father of stealing that necklace, but he didn't do it. He also says that Pellegrini ordered to have his father murdered, as well as Fabian. He then tells the audience that Pellegrini stooped so low to kidnap his own son. As he's saying this, though, police are converging in on the stage so that he has nowhere to go. Right before the police end up coming on stage, he does turn to Juliet and say, "Juliet, your father stole from you. Everybody, the money that you donated tonight, Hubert Pellegrini tried to embezzle it." The police then head on stage to stop Assan. Assan puts his arms up to give himself up, and that's when Ben hits the lights and no one can see anything, and there's pure panic in the auditorium. Everybody starts making their way out as fast as possible. Right before he leaves, Philip ends up transferring all the money to another bank account. Then he meets up with Ben, and the two head off. Assan had stored a disguise away in the room that they were using to collect donations. So he puts that disguise on, and he's able to actually walk right out of the building, past the police, undetected. Or at least, so he thought. He does end up getting caught, but ends up fleeing from the police and hopping in a boat that was waiting for him and driving away. Before he fled the scene, though, he sent Yousef a message because while he had Pellegrini at knife point, his watch was actually recording the entire interaction, and he sends that audio to Yousef. So when Yousef hears it, he's got Pellegrini dead to rights. So the police end up arresting Hubert Pellegrini as well as Dumont, and they both get taken away. After a job well done, Ben ends up giving Philip the rest of his diamonds that he's owed. But right before they take off, Philip turns to Ben and says, "I don't get it. If Assan wanted to get revenge on Pellegrini, why did he just give him all that money?" And Ben tells him that account isn't Pellegrini's. That account is the Foundation's. All the money that was collected is going to the place the people thought it was. Assan, though, knows he needs to leave town. But before he does, he has to say goodbye to a few people. When Assan had collected the bracelet off of Claire's arm, he left a device that started going off. And when Claire found it, there was a message on it. Raoul was able to figure it out that Assan wanted them to meet at a bridge. Sure enough, when they show up, Assan drives under, parks the boat, and heads up top. Assan gives them a big hug, and Claire asks, "Is it finished?" And Assan says, "Yeah, it's all over. But you were right the whole time. I caused way too much trouble with you guys. I need to leave. For you." Claire is begging him not to go, but his mind's made up. He gives them one last hug, tells them he loves them, and says, "I'll be back." And then Assan Diop ends up escaping before the police can get him. And that is the end of Season 2 of Lupin, or